So hello, everyone. Welcome once again to today's talk. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Cristian Hernandez-Blick, Head of Program at Interspecies Internet, and it's my pleasure to welcome all of you on behalf of the trustees and the organization to another Interspecies Conversations lecture. As many of you may know, Interspecies Conversations is a monthly online lecture series where leading thinkers share and discuss work that deepens our understanding of non-human communication, behavior, intelligence, and welfare. We aim to platform emerging discoveries, explore innovative ideas and research, and host open discussions where the community can join the conversation with questions and feedback. And if you enjoy these talks, we ask you to consider making a one-time or recurring donation to Interspecies Internet to support our public programming and other projects and activities. You can find a link to our donation page on our website, which is interspecies.io/donate, as well as in the video descriptions on our YouTube channel. And Caro, I think shortly will share a link in the chat to that as well. So today we are joined by biologist, entrepreneur, and founder of Nature Perspectives, Gal Zanir. Gal Zanir is a passionate wildlife biologist, entrepreneur, and conservation innovator, pioneering new ways to reconnect people with the natural world. He previously co-founded Wild Biotech Limited, leading expeditions across the world to uncover the biodiversity of wildlife microbiomes. He holds a master's in conservation leadership from the University of Cambridge, where he now teaches on systems innovation, AI, and future thinking for nature. Gal's work bridges science, technology, philosophy, and imagination to advance nature's voice in society. So in his talk, Gal will explore an emerging technological paradigm where artificial intelligence can help us reconnect with the living world. He'll discuss how AI can simulate the perspectives of animals, plants, and entire ecosystems, enabling people to engage in meaningful first-person conversations with the natural world. His project, Nature Perspectives, pioneers this new medium of engagement, using large language models and real-world data to bring nature's stories, experiences, and voices into public consciousness. These first-person AI simulations hold the promise of fostering empathy, shifting societal norms, and catalyzing systemic change by expanding our moral circle beyond the human. So in today's discussion, we will delve into the science of empathy-building conversations, showcase real-world examples, and reveal how this technology is being developed as a tool for education, advocacy, legal representation, and public engagement, ultimately inviting us to reimagine our relationship with the rest of nature through novel mediums for connection. And so with that, I'll turn the floor over to Gal. Welcome. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you so much, Cristian, and thank you everyone for showing up. I'm super happy to share more about Nature Perspectives with you. I will just share my screen. Everyone can see the screen? Good, cool. So I will share that Abik Pali, my co-founder at Nature Perspectives, is also joining us today. And we're very excited to share and also discuss with you what we're building at Nature Perspectives. We highly respect the community in Interspecies Internet. And a little bit before we'll share about Nature Perspectives, allow me to take you a few decades back to when I was a kid. So back when I was a kid, I used to run off to the hills next to my hometown. And I spent so much time there that I came to know every individual rock or plant or path and the many individual animals that were sharing this space with me. And I was always looking for ways to better connect with them on a personal level. I remember this one time when the usual owl was standing up on the top of its usual tree on the side of a hill. And I really wanted to get closer, but every time I tried it before, it would take off within seconds of me even thinking about it. And I remember thinking, a young kid running off to the hills, thinking, what if I would step into the mind of the owl and ask myself what would make the owl trust me? And I conducted this imaginative exercise trying to think as the owl. And I remember thinking, oh, the local gazelle didn't bother him at all. They were minding their business. He was minding his business. They were standing very close together. So I realized I should just pretend to be a gazelle. But now I had to step into the mind, into the experience of the local gazelle. So I remember bending down and slowly zigzagging my way up the hill, um, picking up shrubs and pretending to be eating them until within a few minutes, I raise my head and I see my friend the owl 1 meter away from me. And we're looking each other at the eye. And I slowly raise my old digital camera and take this picture. Now, for me as a kid, this moment of a shared understanding with another being, with a non-human being, and a shared experience with one was so profound. And what I didn't know back then is that these imaginative exercises that I was conducting intuitively in the professional jargon are called perspective taking. So the cognitive ability of us to imagine and understand the experiences of the other or stepping into the shoes of the other. Now, I also, perspective taking is proven to be a very empathy evoking exercise, right? And that's important for later in our talk. But I also remember the day when the first bulldozers came about and completely distracted this entire habitat that I loved so much. I remember they were doubling the size of my hometown back then. And I remember feeling helpless, as if no one else is aware of the so many lives that are being lost there, and feeling very frustrated of the fact that they didn't have any voice in the decisions leading to the destruction of their habitat. Now, fast forward to 2.5 years ago. I'm a researcher at the intersection of emerging technology and nature conservation. And my role was to deep dive into new technologies and see how can we harness them for nature conservation. Back then, it was the early days of ChatGPT, GPT-3, to those of you who communicated with it. And I remember speaking with it for weeks upon weeks until at a certain moment, I realized that I'm starting to feel something towards ChatGPT. I don't know if any one of you had this feeling. It was very subtle, but it was a sense of connection. And that was really novel back then. And I remember thinking, all this time we're trying to connect people with the natural world, and here comes this technology that merely by enabling a conversation fosters a meaningful connection with it. And the next thought was, what if we could adjust that or project that, apply it into the things around us that we wish people to converse with and connect with? And I looked around me in this Airbnb apartment that I was hiring, that I was renting. And the first non-human that came to view was this Monstera houseplant. So I stayed up all night and I built this protocol. And this is how nature perspectives work. So it's important to keep track. The protocol gathers all the scientific information about the species alongside the life history of the individual and everything we can conclude about the life and the lived experiences of this particular individual. And it repackages it from a first-person perspective to enable a conversation. So all this data is being repackaged from a first-person perspective. That took us one night, and by morning time, we already engaged in conversation. It introduced itself as Monte de Monstera, and it shared stories about its ancestors in the rainforests of Mexico and how it felt like to be a Monstera back then, to climb the trees for light, and all the way to how it feels like right now when the first morning sunlight goes through the window and to conduct photosynthesis, right? And these few minutes of conversations, I've learned so much more than I've ever known about this species and this individual, that in the following weeks, I went all around the city I lived in, and simulated other non-human perspectives. I imagined all these non-human stories that are all around us and that we're missing. For instance, this lonesome tree at the city square wasn't always lonesome. By enabling a conversation with it, I came to learn that it was part of an entire ancient sycamore fig plantation that was standing there before the city square was constructed. He told me how the local residents back in the 1920s and 30s used to come and make jam out of their fruits, and how it used to communicate with other trees through the root systems. Furthermore, I came to learn through the conversation that the only reason it is still standing there in the city square is that in my city in the 1930s, there was an environmental protest to keep the trees standing. And that's the only survivor from back then. So wrapping this part up, now all of a sudden this tree that I was passing by for so many times before now holds a lot more meaning to me. That was 2.5 years ago. Ever since, Abik, myself, and a dedicated team have built Nature Perspectives with a threefold mission to foster profound connections with the natural world by enabling anyone to have conversations with any natural entity around them. Second part of the mission is to promote nature's agency in society, meaning to represent nature in decision making. And last but not least, this is a big part of what we're building, is to spark new scientific endeavors. So imagine that all these interactions at scale, right? Tens of thousands of interactions of human and non-human simulations are being transcribed and anonymized. And each interaction is going through a pipeline of proprietary AI analysis models that measure the levels of empathy in each conversation. It measures attitude change from the beginning to the end of the conversation. Can we actually notice and measure attitude change? And all the way to the learning quality within the interaction. So the idea here is to build this robust data repository of these novel interactions and to be able for the first time to determine what is it in these conversations that is effective in evoking empathy versus which communications are not. So empathy and attitude change. In each of our simulations, we uphold these three guiding pillars, right? So scientific integrity, meaning that alongside the imaginative storytelling, we are a storytelling platform. We make sure that everything is rooted in scientific facts, the respectful representation of the natural world. And I wish to focus on the third one specifically today, which is unmediated engagement. So our aim, after all, is to have people engaging with the natural world and not with digital representations of the natural world. And the way we achieve it is that in every design decision alongside this journey, we build for an unmediated engagement. For instance, the simulation itself would encourage you, conversing with it, to look closer, to engage your senses, to listen carefully, sometimes when it's safe to touch the bark, for instance. So to engage with the real world entity. And the second part of that is our interface itself would, once you engage in natural conversation, it blanks out. So we wish to draw your attention out of the screen and into nature in front of you. That's in the cases where you're actually in person and interacting. Everything we do is underpinned by behavioral and social science foundations. First of all, conversation is just a much better way to learn. And we're seeing it all across our communications, which I'll share with you in a bit. First-person accounts, so to listen to stories from and with nature rather than about nature, is far more effective in evoking empathy. And I won't touch today upon the other points because I want us to reach something more in-depth in another slide. All in all, we realize that this is the material through which new worldviews may emerge and can emerge. Now, before I show you some examples of how it looks like in the real world, I want to take you a little bit inside this digital mind. So each of these simulations, you remember I shared that the algorithm is gathering all the scientific information that's available alongside the individual story and life history, and repackaging it. And we're building this document per simulation that we're calling a digital mind, which includes a lot of different variables. I'll give you one example. The bank of scientifically probable memories that this individual has went through in their life. And the idea is to enhance the inner world that the user is engaging with. Now, these are three features that we're working towards, and I wanted to share with you today. One is imagine what is happening when these natural entity simulations are enhanced with long-term memory, and they can remember all the interactions of people around them. Let's take, for example, the tree in the city square, right? Enhanced awareness is another thing we're working towards, in which all the reflections of people about the tree through the conversation enhance the knowledge of the simulation itself about the tree. So over time, it gets more and more believable, factual, reliable, and effective. And finally, real-world coupling, in which we will connect sensors and other real-time data sources to the simulation itself. Now, we envision nature perspectives as an enabling technological base layer that will be able to simulate diverse and any natural entity out there that you're wishing to simulate. And through that, to spawn a lot of different independent initiatives, of which some of them we're already started working on. And I'll share just a few examples. Currently, we're working with museums and botanic gardens, nature reserves, and municipalities, places where people already go to engage with the natural world and learn about it. And there we're simulating the perspectives of nature or specimens at museums or in botanic gardens. But a few of the more thought-provoking use cases, for instance, one of which is the non-human use initiative, which we're working on. This is a news system that reimagines current events that we're all consuming from non-human eyes and enabling you to converse with these non-human reporter simulations. And the second one, which also fits the interspecies internet theme, is the first interspecies social media. So what happens when people imagine a city where people are awakened to these simulated perspectives or awakening these perspectives and can follow them over the long term. So the citrus tree in your neighborhood can alert you or tweet, right? That its blossom is upcoming, and you can keep this relationship long term. So these are just a few of the use cases we're building towards. And now, before wrapping up, I just wanted to share with you a few of the actual results and how it looks like on the ground, right? So a year and a half ago, almost, we launched our first large-scale public engagement pilot. And back then, we decided to do it guerrilla style. We went to Cambridge at the UK, and we placed hundreds of QR codes across the city of Cambridge. And the goal was one, to understand how people wish to, like, what do people make out of it, giving the opportunity to engage with the natural world in these conversations. So this is how the map of Cambridge looked like in the day after. You can see that people were able to converse with the squirrel at the park, the pigeon at the market square, a hedgehog, a swan on the river, and even the river cam itself and the sun eventually, and many individual trees throughout Cambridge who have very interesting stories themselves. And it was running for 3 weeks. So QRs placed in Cambridge, people awaken in the morning and being able to converse with the natural world. What do they make out of it? We got over 6,000 QR scans in 3 weeks. And eventually we recorded 1,600 interactions of people with nature around them. Now, analyzing these conversations, we came across a broad spectrum of what people wish to make out of it, right? So anything from a child who kept coming back every morning to engage with their hedgehog friend and asking about their nocturnal adventures, to students who were sitting by the river and asking the river to guide them in meditation from the river's perspective, and all the way to an architect who advised with the sun about their projects and about light and shadow mapping. So we really saw a lot of different use cases when it's unguided and undirected, and people can just do with it what they wish. Now, this is a slightly overwhelming slide, but this is some of the feedback that we gathered during this pilot. So we asked people to fill in an online form, and you can pick and choose just a few of these and read through. But the responses were also diverse. Anything from people sharing, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but people sharing that it allowed them to embrace their childish nature and connect with the river, to people who it allowed them to vent following a difficult work day. And a lot of parents who shared really emotional feedback on how their children interacted with it. And yeah, you can see over at the top left over there that a 7-year-old loved it. He really did think that the tree was communicating, and he wanted to engage with it more when they came back home. And these kind of new stories and new possibilities to connect people with the natural world. We asked them if they would be interested in speaking with more simulations of nature in the future, and that you can see that the vast majority was saying yes, and most of them were saying highly interested in conversing with the natural world through this platform. Now, one thing that I didn't mention before is that thanks to the flexible nature of large language models, each of these interactions is personalized, it's age adaptive. So you're being asked your age, then your first name for it to be personalized. And just in these 3 weeks, we facilitated conversations of people from 100 different nationalities, ages 4 to 89, and conversations in 10 different languages. Now, ever since we raised these numbers, but that's just to give you a sense of how this new medium of communication enables doing it at scale and in different contexts. We then launched a year of experiment at the Cambridge Museum of Zoology, where people come to converse with the exhibits at the museum. And ever since, we also launched at the Nature Reserve in Germany and a pilot in the California Academy of Sciences and so on. So we're now nearing, fastly coming up to 10,000 interactions that's been recorded, which again gives a sense of how it will look like at scale. One more thing that I wish to share with you guys today is research conducted by a Cambridge master's student who took Nature Perspectives as a research platform. And we invite you, we know that all of you are highly interested in this field. We view Nature Perspectives as a research platform that can serve you in your experiments as well. What this student had done was to simulate the perspective of a cockroach. And the research question was, can we evoke empathy towards non-charismatic or highly non-charismatic species using these conversations? Now, it's an entire thesis, but just to pick one visual out of here, the bottom line was that in the pre-surveys, the most prominent emotions were disgust, annoyance, and fear towards the cockroach. And after at least 5 minutes of conversation, it turned into curiosity and fascination. Some even said inspiration from the cockroach. So you can see a very short-term but significant change in prominent emotions. And we're aiming to also query or have them report after a little while. So this happened a month ago. I'm wrapping up with how towards this future of interspecies communication that most of us are excited towards, and giving a few side notes. So in this beautifully growing movement of interspecies communication and multi-species societies, we're seeing a lot of initiatives such as the wonderful Earth Species Project, where people are aiming to decipher the true communications of natural entities and non-humans, right? And this is what we call true agency. Within a decade, less, more, we will be able to give true agency in our societies, hopefully to more than humans. What we're doing is we classify it as simulated agency. And first of all, it can be much more guided than a true conversation, right? Which for better and for worse. And secondly, we're focusing on the human side of the interspecies interaction. So if we are getting to such a future within a decade where we can communicate with some other species, are we ready? What do we know about how people choose to engage with nature around them? And what do we know about effective communications, which are interspecies communications? So these are things that we can already start investigate today using these simulations. And finally, this is an effective, high impact, low hanging fruit that we can all harness today already to start engaging in research and in advocacy and so much more. Because after all, every child who can imagine the lived experiences of other beings around them will forever carry this sense of care for nature with them. And I'm opening the stage for questions, and wish to thank you very much, guys. I will just share that we're looking forward now to form partnerships with either research institutes, but also nature reserves, municipalities, museums and botanic gardens, and we'll soon have our public launch that we will share with you as well. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you so much, Gal, for that wonderful talk. I'm sure there's a lot of sort of open threads here for us to pick up on. So as you mentioned, we'll open things up now for audience Q&A and discussion. Just a reminder, folks can either post questions in the chat log and I'll read them out, or use the raise hand function to speak on the call, and I can just call people in order. And feel free to sort of introduce yourself and say a little bit about your background if you'd like as well. I have a little question to kick things off that maybe I feel like I'm sure you've gotten before, but how do you and your team deal with, say, like the common errors of large language models, like hallucination or fabrications? I think most people are probably familiar with that, but if not, this is the idea that AI systems generate content that is factually incorrect, and even if trained exclusively on very particular kinds of data sets, like say high quality scientific data, maybe the frequency of hallucinations might drop, but there's still the possibility that it can fabricate misleading information. And how do you deal with that in the system?
Right. Thank you, Christian. So I'll answer in two parts. One is about hallucinations, and the other is about AI bias, which I'm sure is also something we're interested in. So in terms of hallucination, first of all, we're monitoring from day one of this initiative. We're monitoring each interaction is going through the analysis pipeline. One of the analysis is both human supervised and AI alone, factual accuracy monitoring. So we were able to see that over time in the past 2 years, we're nearing 99.8% factual accuracy. So we're starting to see the hallucinations in these conversations reduced and reduced. And specifically what we're seeing in the 0.2% of non-factual information is comparisons. For instance, the whale is sharing that it's weighing like 2 average cars, and that the AI wasn't correct on, right? But in terms of the physiology, the publications, and the non-scientific knowledge, we nearly don't find any mistakes already. And that's slowly being reduced. The second part is AI bias, right? So our main current approach into, we don't know, none of us know what is a non-human perspective, right? And our current approach to how to let the public engage with that is that we're training the AI to share the counterintuitive. So instead of going for the statistically significant data that AIs are trained on, which is the human perception of this species, we're aiming to get out of it. And we found that by prompting and training AIs to go for the counterintuitive insights and the counterintuitive worldviews, we're able to detach it from utilitarian views, anthropocentric views, and so on. So that's our current approach, and I'm sure it will evolve.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. And it kind of leads into this other question I had, which was, yeah, if you could just talk a little bit more about some of the difficulties of simulating communication with a non-human entity in a non-anthropomorphic way. So it seems like kind of a thin line to walk between conferring agency or subjectivity or sentience to natural phenomena without carrying over aspects of the human experience, which is arguably very difficult to step out of, possibly maybe even impossible. But when I was thinking about it, on the one hand, I also think that sort of properties like agency and sentience are, likely to be continuous between humans and other forms of life, and that notion may even be more scientifically or increasingly scientifically grounded, and maybe to what degree or which kinds of organisms are still sort of open questions, but maybe those properties are not intrinsically anthropomorphic projections necessarily. But obviously, yeah, simulating intelligence, experience, and communication with a non-human entity is a very complicated undertaking. So I'm just curious to hear a bit more about, what are the challenges there, and like you mentioned, with bias and so on.
Yeah. So we had a lot, and we still have a lot of ethical and practical considerations in terms of how to shape these simulations, right? And I'll start by saying that we're only just beginning to understand this practice. And in terms of the anthropomorphism, one thing, as I shared, is that we're aiming to guide these models, these conversational models, as much as possible away from anthropocentric and utilitarian views, or other stereotypical views as well about the natural world. And our main approach is to train it away by emphasizing the counterintuitive, which usually falls outside of the normal perception of a non-human. And there's an inherent single anthropomorphizing exercise that we are doing, which is to give it the ability to speak in human language, right? And that's the bridge here. That's the core pillar that nature perspective stands upon. And that we cannot reduce. We neither want to reduce. And then comes the question of, to which use case are we aiming for in terms of stepping away from anthropomorphizing? Because to engage the public with nature, we can see it in nature documentaries, right? There is romanticization over there. There is anthropomorphizing over there, right? And eventually, if that is effective in evoking empathy, shall we use it for public engagement or not in this manner? And then comes the use case of representing nature in research or decision making, which requires for a far more scientific lens, and that we haven't cracked yet, right? But as AI continues to develop and as we're gathering more data, I'm certain that we'll make small steps towards better understanding of the actual perspectives of natural entities. I hope that answers.
Yeah, no, that's great. And you know, as you said, we're sort of here in the early stages of trying to sort out all these problems and these interesting scientific questions. And actually, so Fiona, there's a few questions in the chat. Fiona asks, what do you see as the main problems and dangers with these simulations? And I don't know if you know, in particular, what you know, sort of dangers Fiona's asking about, but I think, yeah, broadly speaking, I you know, had similar questions about what kinds of ethical issues arise from the project. Are there considerations that come into play when you make decisions about personalities or emotions, or which stories best represent a natural entity, or maybe what cultural influences you draw from? And but yeah, maybe risks of these simulations.
Yeah. So I'm not sure we have enough time, guys, to mention all the risks and challenges, but to name a few, we can divide it into two. There are the risks that are inherent to communicating with AI. These are the same risks that OpenAI and Gemini and Google and other companies are facing. The intimacy with these simulations, right? And how to direct it towards a constructive and respectful conversation. This is a major one. The second one is user safety. So for instance, engaging in sensory experiences, how do we ensure that the model doesn't tell anyone to touch a snake, right? So these are immediate kind of safety measures and guardrails that we have to put in place. And the third is the safety for nature. So again, we're not using it today to guide decision making just yet, but in a future in which it will guide the decision making, how do we ensure that these are actually good for the natural entity represented and so on? My answer into how we address them is we don't know yet. And we're doing it gradually, and we're starting with public engagement and slowly researching the possibilities there. And Abik, if you wish to step into any question, please do. Hey, Treasure.
Oh, Big, we can't hear you for some reason. You're
Oh,
unmuted.
I'm sorry. Should I go ahead and ask my question?
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Just hold on, Treasure. I think Gal was turning to Abik for some further elaboration on that, but
I'll just make one little point, which is that right now, what we're making very clear to all of our users is that this is a creative, imaginative exercise that we are putting users through to help them imagine, at least begin to imagine what it might be that might be in the interest of these animals, and try to imagine the world from their perspective. We make it very clear that we're not representing real agency yet, but what we're trying to do is we're trying to make the grounds fertile such that when we're able to crack interspecies communications, humans are more open to listening to nature. We're kind of setting the grounds for that. We're not at all claiming that we're representing their interests yet, but we're kind of as true as we can be to current science and research. We kind of state things from their perspective as much as we can perceive. And we're just trying to say that it's a creative, imaginative exercise. Sorry, Treasure, please.
right.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you. That helped answer some of my query. I was curious as how would you model the AI to receive the perspective of like a hive mind, like in a bee or an ant? Like from the human anthropomorphic perspective, there's the American culture is kind of geared toward the individual, where like a Japanese corporate culture is more geared toward the group. How would you like interpret the interests of an entire collective like a hive? Would you look at it from the perspective of the queen, from the drone, or how would the AI try to parse the individual wants and needs of a group of individuals?
What a
And
beautiful
how
question.
would that reply to the perspective, perhaps a non-human species that might visit us from another world where they're not, functioning in the idea of an individual?
Yeah, what a beautiful question. To date, I can share that we've simulated a few perspectives that you can consider as a collective, right? A coral, a brain coral, which is a colony of polyps, and a few others. And there it was purely a creative exercise of how do you actually engage in conversation with the collective. Does it speak with an I, with a we, etc. So we had a lot of storytelling and creative kind of decisions to make over there. But what the future might hold in these terms is a bunch of AI agents, each representing an individual in the colony, and some kind of an overlaying or a base layer AI which looks at all of that and represents the collective. So I never thought about it in this way, but thank you for provoking the thought. And if you have an idea, I would love to hear it.
Yeah, thanks, Treasure. It was actually a question that kind of came to my mind when you were mentioning the Monstera plant conversation, the initial one, because it struck me that there was an aspect to the individual perspective coming through the communication that was also a kind of like phylogenetic memory of its ancestors. And there was this sort of expanded notion of the subject as, being connected historically through a lineage. So I think there's a lot of room there for these sort of like counterintuitive, non-anthropomorphic ways of thinking about really how complicated the question of biological individuality is.
Right. We face this question of ancestral knowledge, yes or no, and how to even curate that. So you can see there are a lot of interesting creative decisions that we have to take along the beginning of the way.
Yeah. So we have another question in the chat from Brenda Cooper. Brenda says, this seems like a three-way conversation between two non-human entities, the AI and a part of nature, and a single human. And it seems like the goal is to help humans grow more connected to nature. So how do you center the conversation on the human experience? Or is that even a goal? I think maybe this was sort of indirectly touched on by Gal and Abik, but if you want to elaborate on that. And there's a second related question. Have you seen any cases where the natural entity has reacted to the human in a way that can be verified or validated? I'm not exactly sure what is meant by that, but Brenda, if you want to speak to it in more detail, and Gal, if you want to consult the chat, the questions we're kind of long.
Abik, again, feel free to step in. I'm not sure about the first question. I would love to understand it a little better. So there seems like a three-way conversation between two non-human entities, the AI part of nature and a single human entity. It seems like the goal is to help humans grow more connected. Yeah, that is the stated goal. How do you center conversation on the human experience? Or is it that even the goal? Okay. I'm not sure I understand. Abik, do you understand? Or Brenda, do you mind sharing a little more?
Well, I'm thinking of it as it's a three-way conversation. You have three entities in this conversation. You're interested in affecting the human experience, but you're also clearly interested in improving the AI as well through the experience. So you've got things you're trying to have happen between the human and the AI, but what are you trying to have happen between the human and nature? And is that impacting nature as well? Or is each piece of nature kind of a stand-in?
Right. Yeah. That's a
I don't even
beautiful
know if I
point.
can be clear, but
No, it's a beautiful framework to think about it, like what is happening between the human and the AI, and the human and nature and the AI, right? Once there's some kind of real world coupling there. I can share, and I hope that answers in proxy to your question. One thing that we're hoping to see and to measure is psychological transference of attributes. So when you speak with one pigeon in these simulations, would you attribute these lived experiences, and would you recall your conversation with the pigeon at the market square once you see these other pigeons, and kind of create this overlapping effect over the entire species? So we're starting to see these kind of things of people who recall their conversations every time they encounter a monstera plant or a pigeon, which is a very interesting effect. And I hope that proxies kind of the effects that we're aiming to achieve between humans and the natural entities themselves. But learning and empathy and expanding our circle of empathy to the entire species from the individual, etc. These are effects that we're aiming for.
Caro has a question in the chat. She was asking or saying she's keen to see how nature perspectives evolves to hold multiplicity and locality in its AI mediated stories. So how does it perform when it learns from elders, indigenous communities, local fishermen, for example?
Right. And even how it storytells when encountering someone who sees nature as a resource to explore. There are well, we nearly got to 10,000 interactions, so we saw a lot of different examples of different people engaging in different ways. There are some guidelines that we're giving it, like keeping it respectful, which we're examining if that's the correct way, right? And we also had one part of our what we call the digital mind is how different cultural how different cultures perceive this particular species, to give the AI some kind of context into the myriad of ways that it might be perceived by humans. So that's another way we enrich it with different cultural perspectives. And we are curious as well to see how it performs and learns with elders and indigenous communities. We had very few of these already, and Abhik wants to add something.
Yeah, I just want to add one little thing, which is that this is a very interesting question, right? It's a very interesting question to see. For example, one of the first plants, as Gal said, like the first plant we simulated was Monte the Monstera, and it spoke about its roots from South America, and it spoke with a slight Latin accent. We found it delightful. But that is a question to be asked. Is that a respectful representation of the place where it comes from? Or are we actually contributing more towards anthropomorphization? But wouldn't it be very weird if Monte the Monstera spoke with a standard American accent or a British accent? Is that more disrespectful then? So one of the parts of our project is also to convene interdisciplinary experts to really try to answer some of these questions. It is to conduct research on the ethical and the respectful representation of nature, and finding like some answers to these questions as to what would be the most respectful way. So if there's a kangaroo that we're simulating, should we give it an Australian accent, or is that kind of offensive? Like, what would be the right way to do it? These are some of the questions we wish to answer. And since we have a network of experts around us, it would be great to hear from some of you what you guys think as well.
You can see that the journey has a lot of questions. And that's part of what makes it exciting.
Yeah, Treasure, do you want to?
Yeah, I just had a quick question on your cockroach experiment. Did you show visuals of cockroaches? I mean, how did you get people to change their perspective from something so negative to something kind of neutral or even positive? I mean, I could see, cockroaches are pretty amazing if you think about their durability, their survivability, and just their dynamics of an engineering perspective. But in terms of how did you show people like visuals or video or just give them raw stats?
I think you partially answered it, because most people don't get to think about the incredible capabilities of cockroaches and the incredible lives of cockroaches. But merely by enabling conversation, people can learn about these capabilities. But also there's another part to it, which is treating it as an individual with lived experiences. And that in itself, when you get to engage in conversation, that in itself has this profound effect, because we don't attribute this to cockroaches. In terms of visuals, there was a tiny profile image on the screen, but there were not like 3D avatars or something like that. So that wasn't an in-person cockroach, just to make it clear. These were people remotely conversing with it.
We got another question in the chat. Josh Cohen asks if you can expand on the feedback loop from the real world as experienced by a non-human being that would improve the specificity of its perspective. So Josh gives an example saying if a local organization plants a Miyawaki-style forest, could the organization offer data from sensors in the forest that would allow plants within the forest to improve their communication to community members over time? And maybe in addition to sensor data, maybe folks within the community can add subjective information about their relationship to the plant or some other kind of additional data.
So I think it's a wonderful idea to have different natural entities using the platform as a medium of engagement with one another. We're currently not focused on that at all. So different plants in a Miyawaki forest, but I can see experiments going in that direction. So different simulated perspective within a colony or within a restricted habitat, engage with one another. I haven't thought about how will that affect the real world entities, right? The real world forest. There are some experiments I think you hosted in the community, the project who allows financial agency for gorillas, if I'm correct, right? So some of you remember. So if we integrate our platform where a group of gorillas can engage between themselves and then make this a decision and then couple it with this financial system that gives financial agency for gorillas, then I can see how it affects the real world gorillas, right? So these kind of sprouts of initiatives around this movement, once they integrate together, I can see great things, very speculative futures that are happening in reality.
Yeah, for those of you who are curious, I think Gal was referring to Tahanu, which is a project that is trying to build infrastructure to, as they say, enable a circular flow of money and data between other species and humans that ensures some kind of it ensures conservation goals and this interest of flourishing together as a ecosystem. So we did host a sort of roundtable to discuss early steps of that project's development with one of our co-founders and trustees, Neil Gershenfeld. We can put the link in the chat later if you want to check that out. But there was one question in the chat. Eric asked if the conversation could mix sound and teach humans what we know about animal language. I guess maybe like represent vocalizations from certain types of species where we have acoustic data, bioacoustic data, not just maybe human language. That's my interpretation maybe of what Eric is asking. But
such a beautiful idea, and I see that Carol also commented with the Duolingo for animal communication. We're already enabling, so if a user would ask to hear a voice from the song thrush, it will provide with some vocal samples of the real world animal. But it's a great idea to couple it with the things we actually know about animal communication and use it as an actual bridge and not just human language.
interesting. Francis, do you want to ask a question?
Hi, thank you so much. That was such an interesting talk. I really appreciate it. I'm wondering how, if there are specific models that you find to be the most effective in this type of, for your purposes, and what the qualities of those models might be. I remember I was talking to a software engineer about the concept of, I hate saying it because of my accent, but Umwelt. And I'm wondering if certain models are more in line with that. I also wonder what you train your models on. Thank you.
Guys, this Q&A, you're giving us more ideas than we give you answers. That's one thing. So thank you, Francis. And we did some comparisons in terms of the quality of conversational experience between different large language models. I cannot disclose the LLM that we're currently using, but I can share that in terms of conversational experience, GPT-5 overtook in the metrics that we were measuring. In terms of the capability to simulate the Umwelt, that's a great idea for an experiment, actually, that we need to test. So what kind of counterintuitive worldviews and lived experiences different models come up with. We cannot say much about the data itself that we're using as well, Francis, I'm sorry. But fine-tuned LLMs and well-established scientific databases about this species. And we developed a method to gather the life story to analyze an image and gather as much as possible and conclude as much as possible about the life history of an individual. Josh, I see a raised hand.
Hi, sorry, my camera is off, or if my camera's broken, or I would turn it on. My apologies. I fear I wasn't super clear in my question. My apologies. I'm with a community organization. We do a lot of plantings around our local city, specifically Milwaukee-style forests and others. And we do a lot of community engagement where we are trying to get others to take the perspectives of nature as a goal of having people have ongoing relationships with those plantings. And so what I was really kind of trying to ask was whether there is a way to work at some point, I suspect you may not be ready for this now, but at some point to work with you where we already are doing a lot of putting in a lot of sensors. We're working with our local university to access data for these plantings. And it would be really cool if folks who were planting could then have ongoing conversations where they include what they're observing in addition to the sensor data, so that as the forest grows, there could be a living history within the humans who are attending it in addition to via this. And so I guess what I was really asking was, are there planned opportunities for small organizations like the one I am with to do that sort of work?
Vic, if you'd like to step in, feel free. Thank you, Josh.
Yeah, definitely. This is one of the very, as I wrote in the chat as well, it's one of the very interesting citizen science opportunities that we have as well, to have like a community-based approach to data gathering as well. So, for example, if you've been conversing with this particular tree um, over the last 6 months, and then you are excited and you're conveying to it that you're excited about its flowering season, and then one day you come and you go like, oh wow, I love your new flowers. It kind of feeds back into what we know about the tree. And we do not have this right now. So right now what we do is we create like these simulations, and we put initially some information, as much information as we can, about that particular individual. But what we would like to do in the future is try to make it like a community exercise, and the tree might also encourage you to be like, oh, can you take a photo of me? And then once you take the photo, that will also go into feeding us back more information about the tree, in order to make it as believable as possible, so that the next person who comes along, the tree can speak to it about its flowers, and then it can tell the person, I bloomed only yesterday. So great idea. Again, as Gal said, great idea, and something that we're thinking about as well.
And Josh, we're very much open to collaborate with small and big organizations. You were mentioning perspective taking by the local citizens with these non-human and the trees, and it makes me think about, if you already have these sensors integrated and real-time data flowing in, we are working on how to integrate this real-time data into the simulations. So you could actually aim for this creative exercise or imaginative exercise of taking the perspective of a tree right now. So what is the tree experiencing right now, and how to bridge it through this conversational experience to the person, if that's clear.
Awesome. We don't have any more questions in the chat, but maybe give everyone a moment if they want to ask a question on the call. In the meantime, I have a question. It's maybe a little bit of a kind of, convoluted kind of philosophical question, but if you'll humor me. So in previous interviews, you've talked about nature perspectives conversations in terms of animism. So this, for those who are not familiar with what animism is, it's generally speaking, the attribution of something like sentience or agency, or maybe like a soul, to natural phenomena. And I was kind of curious about your thoughts on this connection between animism and empathy, and generating empathy, but also this tension between science and animism. So, I think there's sort of this theoretical legacy to modern science, which kind of brings about a prevailing mechanistic natural philosophy where nature is viewed as a machine. It's governed by mathematical laws and reducible to strictly physical elements, and not and stripped of mind-like properties. And animism, I guess, in that context, is generally interpreted as unscientific, outside of the scope of a naturalistic worldview, and to some extent it kind of informs a kind of human exceptionalism, this idea of nature where humans are completely distinct from other forms of life, and where the attributes of mind and sentience are thought to be exclusive to humans, and therefore maybe can't serve as the basis of any empathetic identification or affinity with non-human life. And our current scientific and technological paradigm originates to some extent from this way of thinking about the natural world and treating the natural world. So there seems to be this kind of like intrinsic tension between those two views. And I'm kind of just curious about how you think of that tension, if animism is just this necessary non-scientific idea that we need to use to counter or elevate the techno-scientific lens through which we interpret the natural world.
Right. Yeah. A lot to unpack, and thank you so much, Cristian. It's a very interesting question. first of all, yeah, the scientific and technological progress that was guided by this lens of exceptionalism got us to where we are in terms of the technology and science, but it also got us to where we are in terms of our ever growing disconnection from the natural world and the consequences that the natural world is experiencing because or alongside that. So I personally see animism as the attribution of lived experiences, so some kind of experience. Some would call it sentience, others would call it otherwise. I'm not sure. It depends which scientist you ask if that's a scientific notion or not. But I'm interested in the results. So you asked about the connection between animism and empathy, and if I think it's a necessary thing. And there, to answer that, I'm guided by this notion of the circle of empathy. There is the in-group within my circle. Whatever I see as similar to me, I attribute empathy towards. And that's a simplification, of course. And whatever I don't see as experiencing lived experiences as I do falls outside. And that happens between human groups as well, a lot. And I see animism, or the attribution of lived experiences to nature around us, as a measure to cross or to expand the circle of empathy to more than humans. And again, in a simplification, if you're saying this cockroach has lived experiences as I do, not the same, that the simulations would never claim it's anything like a human experience, right? But it has lived experiences, and I can understand them through human language. We found that it evokes empathy. And personally, I think it's a necessary shift that we are nature conservationists, Abik and myself, and we think it's involving empathy evocation within our practices is essential.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, like it depends on which scientists you ask about the question of animism. Maybe we're starting to see, I guess, in that world that science and technology maybe can actually offer us a deeper understanding of things like non-human experience, minds, intelligence, and sentience, and maybe there's something about our understanding and our use of science that has changed since the advent of the Enlightenment, the scientific revolution, that enables us to think about nature in a way that goes beyond this kind of mechanistic naturalism of yesteryear. And yeah, I think it's going to take lots of different innovative efforts like nature perspectives to bring those ideas from science into greater public attention and engagement, and make and kind of like foster empathy out of what Treasure referred to as just these like brute facts about animal life and experience and so on. So
right. Thank you, Cristian.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think maybe we can wrap it up there. Yeah, so everyone, please join me in thanking Gal for the fascinating talk and what was a really dynamic discussion. I think with lots of potential new avenues for development and discovery. If you want to learn more about Gal's work, please check out the links in the chat that I will share in just a moment, with Gal's social media, website for nature perspectives, the LinkedIn for nature perspectives. Thank you as well to the interspecies community, as always, for your continued support and interest in our monthly lecture series. If you'd like to learn more about our organization, or stay up to date with our event schedule, projects, and other activities, donate to support our programming, or connect with a community of researchers and enthusiasts, then please follow us on social media and YouTube, join the Interspecies Internet Slack channel, or subscribe to our newsletter. And as usual, I think Caro, has posted links to all of these in the chat. So please check them out and share our work. So on behalf of Interspecies Internet, the trustees in the community, thank you, Gal, for the exciting talk, for sharing your work with us. We're really excited to see how it continues to develop and what it can do for, all these promising avenues of expanding education, advocacy, and representation of the many diverse and intelligent forms of life on this planet. The speaker series will be taking a break during December, but we hope you'll join us again in the new year for more interspecies conversations. But yeah, in the meantime, thanks again. Have a lovely weekend, everyone, and happy holidays. We'll see you all again soon.
Thank you so much, guys. It's been lovely to be hosted here. And please reach out. We'd love to have some more conversations. Thank you, Cristian and Carl.
Thank you so much.